Hello. Can you guys hear me? Right. Let me check. Is it live? Can you hear me well? And can you see my screen, Mr. Lance? Cool. Nice. Then, yeah, let's get started. Like, this is my first time, so I'm not sure how things are supposed to work. But if you can hear me fine, you can look at my screen. That's more than enough to get started with. So, yeah, we are like basically here to chit chat about this new React framework called Remix, and then also like building one of their demo applications using Adonis, and basically talking about all this front end ecosystem and how you can have, I would say, web apps built using backend frameworks, but still have good user experience that a lot of front end folks talks about. So, very first, let's talk about Remix, like what exactly it is. So, I think like Remix got released this week earlier, and it's like all over the internet, and a lot of people are talking about it. And it's basically a React framework that you can use to build dynamic web applications. Now, as per the Remix team itself, it's a bit different from Next, which is like a very popular React framework, because they basically say that we actually want to go back to the web fundamentals, and we actually like want to go back to the basics and build really simple dynamic web apps, and we don't want to like get into all these 300 different rendering modes that you have in the front end ecosystem quite a lot. Like you can create static websites, you can build SPAs, you can build SSR, and then you can do SWR. Then you have incremental statically generated website. So basically, there are like so many rendering modes. And when you're building a dynamic app, which basically means that the data and the state of your application changes as the user of your app interact with it, then like getting into all these static builds is kind of an overkill. And this is what exactly they even talk about on their homepage. So like they have this section which says, while you were waiting for your static site to build, distributed infrastructure got really good, break through the static, which basically means like if you have a dynamic web app, you should like build a server and serve your app from it, versus creating a static build. Then every time like user does something, you like refresh your static build, or you incrementally generate those new pages or delete pages if required. So what I really like about Remix is finally someone from the front end ecosystem is saying that we don't have to like do all these insane things in order to build really simple apps. Let's go back to the basics and like server everything, like rendered everything on the server, and like build our apps that way. And then they like even get into some very specific things. So if I scroll to the bottom, Uh, Here they have some really, yeah, like here they have a section where they say it's so simple, it's kind of silly, just make a form. So basically, in the front end ecosystem, we went like too far that people like even stopped building forms. What they do is they have some state, they bind that state to the input elements, and anytime they have to submit the data to the server, they just go ahead and make an AJAX or a fetch call to submit that data, and they don't need form anymore. So they are like basically talking about these really fundamental things that you should be doing all this, and this is what Remix will allow you. Now, if you look closer, like this is what already the backend frameworks have been doing for years. So if you look at Rails, you look at Laravel, Django, and even Adonis, it's those really like fundamental things, and you build your HTML pages on the server, and then you serve them to the client. That's all. But with Remix, since they are using React for their uh, front end layer, or I would say like for building their views, what they do is they use React on the server to create like these pages, basically the HTML on the server, and then they send it to the client. Then on the client, they do, the rehydration process where the client side of React will take over, and anything that you will do is now client side interactions. I personally think even that is unnecessary. You don't have to do it. Like, there is no point in rehydrating your apps on the client, and you can just like build static pages on the server. Now, an argument that a lot of front end folks give is that if you don't like rehydrate your apps on the client, or if you don't like use React or any front end framework, then you basically don't have good user experience. And usually what I've found is with the user experience, they are talking about sleek page navigations. So basically, like when you're navigating between pages, they don't destroy the entire DOM. They just replace the sections of the page. And similarly, if you are like submitting the form, again, they don't like destroy the entire page. If there is an error, they just like re-render the form. That's all. And in fact, doing all this is quite easy if you use Hotwire or Unpoly. Unpoly is a framework that I use. And you, like for these really simple things, you don't have to like change your entire stack, and you don't have to like start using a front end framework on the back end and start building pages on the back end. You can like use any backend framework you love, and then you can basically use Hotwire or Unpoly and have these like sleek page navigations or in place updates. You can do it, in fact, way more easier than you do it in React. So that's what I thought. Like, I've been using Unpoly for a while, like for a very long time, I would say. And I thought, what about like building a demo application that the Remix team has built using Adonis, and then we will basically like throw Unpoly on top of it to have that great user experience that people usually talk about when they want to justify using a front end framework. So, very first, let's look at the application I'm talking about. It is this Remix jokes application. So, if I go to the app, very first you have to create an account, and once you have an account, you can basically add these jokes over here. So let me open the DevTools, and let's try to play with the application and see how exactly it performed these page updates that leads to a good user experience. So let's say like if I move between these jokes, let's get rid of all these network calls, and now I click here. They basically make a request to the server, they get the joke, and they basically update this section only. So if I go ahead and let's say give it a color of red, And if I switch between pages, you can see that only this section of the app is getting updated, not the entire application, because the inline style we just gave in the dev tools is still there. So that's like one thing uh, that people talk about when they're using a front end framework. The other thing is, let's say, if I zoom in a little bit and if I scroll and if I click here, you can see that the scroll position does not change. I am in the place where I am. Whereas I would like personally expect the sidebar to not scroll, but this area to scroll, but that's fine. That's like a very tiny detail. But like this is the other thing that people usually talk about. Let me zoom out and move this to the right. And the third one is if I like submit the form again, only the form is getting updated. The sidebar is still there. Apart from these few things where you are, like only updating a partial page, you are retaining the scroll position. I don't see anything extra that the front end frameworks do in order to improve the user experience. It's basically up to the developer. If they can build a good app, they can build it. I don't think React or Vue or any framework is going to help apart from these like tiny things. And the good part is just to have, like scroll restoration and partial updates, you don't have to buy into an entire front end framework. You can use something like Unpoly and you can do it quite easily. So uh, I will not like get too much into Unpoly right now because once we will like build the application, you can see how easy it is. But let me just talk about the idea that they are using to basically enhance these server rendered application. That's also one of the main differences between the front end frameworks and something like Hotwire and Unpoly. Front end frameworks make you think about your application in this reactive way from day one. Whereas Unpoly, like with Unpoly, you can build a simple server rendered application and then incrementally you can improve it. So now what exactly they do is they use these HTML, I would say, attributes in order to enhance your application. So what this attribute is doing is anytime you click on this anchor tag, it will make a request to this URL, and that will be a fetch call, like an Ajax call. And whatever the response comes, it will only update a DOM node which has the class of 1. That is what it's going to do. So if I click, it only updates this one. If I click again, it only updates this one. So that is like the basic idea of the framework, that you can use these HTML attributes in order to uh, enhance your application, which otherwise would be a standard web app. And then you can like do layers where like each layer will like show a pop-up or I would say like a model box. You can do a lot of things. You can have transitions between pages, and that is how like the entire library works. So that was just the introduction phase. Now what I'm planning to do is build this application using AdonisJS. So it's going to be a server rendered, very simple web app. And then we will actually put Unpoly on top of it to have the same user experience as this React application, which means we will be able to like restore the user scroll position. We will be able to do partial updates, everything that's happening in this application. And I find it more easier to build it in Adonis versus doing it with React, maybe because I'm like little biased towards my own framework. Is it possible to use SQL triggers in AdonisJS? I think you can using migrations. You just need to like create a migration and write the SQL code to set up a trigger. All right, so let me get rid of this, open a new tab, get rid of this, go back and create a new application, npm init, and I will name it remix jokes lol. Select the web template, set up ESLint, set up Prettier, set up Webpack for building the front end assets. While we are setting up everything, all right, so we are done with the initial dependencies installation. Let me open a new tab and cd into remix jokes lol and open it inside my editor. All right, so everything is done. Let's run notice serve watch to start the development server and open this welcome page. So this is like a very bare bone AdonisJS application. And the next thing we are going to do is uh, we're going to bring in Lucid because we need like this dynamic data that we want to store in the database. So let me install Lucid. All right, and let's configure it as well. Configure AdonisJS/Lucid. I will use SQLite for this demo and let it basically install the dependencies that Lucid needs. Now, while we are building this application, I will not get into the user sign up and login process flow basically, because what we are trying to do here is not like see how Adonis can handle authentication, but basically see how we can have the similar user experience like a front end application, but without using a front end framework and doing server side rendering or SPA and all that stuff. So we'll just like focus on this area, and we just want to make sure that we are able to do partial updates and we are able to like restore the user's scroll position in the terminal. And let's copy this, open this file and drop it here. This will basically test our environment variable to make sure that we have a DB connection environment variable when we run the server and stop the server from running. Otherwise, if it will be undefined, we may get an exception somewhere else in the code, and it will be really hard to debug that it's happening because of this environment variable. That's the reason we validate them. So that part is done. Let's create a new model. So I will say make model joke with a migration, and Open this migration file. Here we will need the joke name. That's a string. It should not be nullable. And then we will have a text area with joke content. That will be not nullable as well. Then we will have just 2 timestamps. I don't think we need anything else. So let's say nowadays migration run. That will just create this database table. And now we will go to our model, create these 2 columns, public name, that's a string, public content, that's a string too, and put these decorators and one here. I think that's all we need on the database side. Next thing we need to do is create a couple of routes. So we need a route to create a new joke. We need a route to view a list of all the jokes, and we need a route to view an individual joke. So let's create them. Route.getJokes. It will be handled by the jokes controller dot index. Create a couple more. This one will be post. That will basically handle the form submission. Then we will have jokes/id. That will show a single joke. And let's create another one to display the form. So we basically have a total of 4 routes. Now let's create this controller. Oh, wow. Kind of messed up. So let me copy paste, get rid of this file and create it again. Okay. So here is our controller. Is there any way to implement soft deletes globally in our models using Adonis 5? I think we have a community package for that. So if you go to GitHub/AdonisJS community/awesome AdonisJS, there you can basically see a list of all the packages that others have created. And I'm quite sure there is one for soft deletes. So you can use that one. All right, so let's build our index page and uncomment this. And here we will get our view, return view dot render pages/jokes/index. What happened to AdonisJS forum? We don't have it live anymore. We moved everything to GitHub discussions. And that way, like, people have to create one less account in order to submit their issues or have conversations. So everything is on GitHub now. So yeah, here we have like our index page for jokes, and we are rendering a template which is inside these directories, and this is the template file. And here we need to like pass in all the jokes. So I will say constant jokes await joke.all. So we are basically using the model to fetch all the jokes and pass it to our template over here. So like a very simple way to render a view in Adonis. Now let's create this template. Nowadays, make view and open it here. Let's drop in some HTML and start with some markup. So I will start with a section. Here we will have div, and inside it we will have a side. Let's give it a class of sidebar wrapper. This will be a sidebar. And let's have another div, then have a main. So basically here we will like show a list of all the jokes that we can see over here. And on the right, we will change the content based upon the page we are on. So here, let's say each joke in jokes and let's have an li, an anchor tag, and here we'll say joke.name. Here we need to link to the jokes controller dot show method and basically pass in the joke ID. And here we will like show, I think, nothing for uh, this page. So if you come here, it shows a random joke. So maybe we can like pull in a random joke and show that. But for now, just leave it empty and see what we get on this page. Let's go back to the browser. And here we say jokes. We get an empty page, but we do have our markup here. And it's empty because we don't have any jokes in the database right now. So what I'm going to do is go back to the remix tutorial, and they basically share some seed data that we can use to uh, where is it? Yeah. So here is like the seed data that we can use in order to like have some default list of jokes. So I'm just going to copy it, and I will create a new seeder called joke. Let's open it, and here pull in our joke model, and we will say create many and pass this array to it. And it needs an array. So let's fix that. And of course, await our function call. So we're basically like creating multiple jokes inside the database. Now let's go ahead and run this seeder. So we'll say dbseed, which will basically run this query, and that uh, puts data into the database. Now, if you go back and do a refresh, yep, we do see a list of all of our jokes here in the sidebar. Now, the next thing we need is every time we click on it, it takes us to that page and show us the content for that individual joke. So let's go back to our jokes controller, copy this method, change to show, and here we'll say find by or fail. And let's pull our route params, and here we'll use it should be find or fail and joke. So we are basically like finding the joke with the ID, and if you're not able to find it, we'll just like throw an exception. And if we are able to find it, we will render this view, and we will like pass the joke instance to it. So let's create this template, make view, and go back to our index page. Right now, I'm just like copy pasting a lot of stuff, but later, like I'll move it to a layout and use that layout in other pages. So right now, like we have this interesting situation that in this template, we don't have access to all the jokes. We only have like access to the one that the user is viewing. So that's the reason I'm like just commenting it out, but I'll get back to it in a second. So here, let's say we want to render the joke name, and here we want to render the joke content. It will be inside a paragraph and a paragraph. So if I click on it, of course, it takes me back to the uh, to that individual page, and it shows me that joke. Again, I can go back and I can go to that joke. Of course, this is not what we want. What we want, the sidebar to be static and only like update this right area. So uh, the simplest way to do that is let's get this thing back and go to our controller. Let's copy this database call put it here, and share all the jokes with our template. Now, if I do a refresh, every time like I move between the jokes, you can see the sidebar is still there, and we are just and we are like also seeing this individual joke. Uh, One more thing that I want to do is add some styles. So let's copy this from here, paste it here, and go to our app.css file. And here I'm going to write some style so that we basically have a sidebar and the main area. So here I will say it has a width of 300 pixels. It has a position of fixed with top to 0, bottom 0, and overflow y should be scroll. And let's have a border right of 1 pixel solid and have some padding from the right, 20 pixels. And here we can call it main. In fact, we can just get rid of that div altogether. So here we'll say main, and we'll say main has a margin lift of 300 pixel, a padding lift of 80 pixels. I think that's all we need. And now we like have this sidebar area, and then we have the main on the right. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm basically going to like move all this shared markup to a template. So let me copy this and make view layouts slash master and move everything here. We will keep our sidebar within the layout because we want this on every page. So let's keep it within our layout right now. And here I can say section main. That means I can come back to my index page and use this layout and then create this main section like this. Or maybe we can keep the main tag there as well. So let's keep this empty, go back to our show page and copy this from there. All right, let's do a refresh. Now, as you can see, like when we move between pages, we do have the sidebar, and here we have the actual joke. Of course, here we are not like here we like don't have a persistent sidebar. We are refreshing the entire page, but we will have that once we will start using Unpoly. Right now, like we have a very standard application. This is the simplest and the quickest way to build and have something out. And once we need a better user experience, we can do it once we have this like basic application running. All right, we have a few questions. Have you tried to implement view white SSR with Adonis? No, I haven't tried that so far. And the reason is if you're like talking about like doing a server-side rendering of view with Adonis, I personally don't do that. I try to stay away from the front-end frameworks as much as I can. I find it, it like I find it very easy to be on the back end, build the applications, and when I want to make them more interactive, I opt in for Hotwire or something like Unpoly. This is what we are going to use today. So back to our code. All right, so right now we have this layout and we have these individual pages, and the pages can basically define the markup for this main area. and they all reuse this sidebar, but every single method has to query this this joke model to fetch all the jokes, and this is something we want to avoid. So what we can do is, uh, there are a couple of ways to do this. Number one, like we create a method within the controller, and instead of having this call inside every method, we just call that method. That's like one way of doing it. The other one is we abstract this method to a view global, and then the layout be responsible for fetching all the jokes. So this is what I'm going to do right now. So what I will do is I will create a preload file. Make prld file. I'll name it view. And let's open this file. Import the view. And here I will define a global called load jokes, and a function that basically queries the joke model to fetch all the jokes like this. And now we can go to our controller. We can get rid of that method call. We can get rid of this one. And let's go back to our layout. And here we can say await load jokes. All right, let's do a refresh. Yep, everything still works fine. Uh, Now, of course, we are like fetching jokes on every single call that we make, even for an individual joke. But at least now we are not doing it inside every controller method. The layout is handling that for us. So at least we have made a little better. Now, all the pages don't have to worry about fetching all the jokes. The layout does that. But later, we also want to get rid of fetching all the jokes until and unless we need them. So um, let's create our form as well. So let's go to our create, and here we'll say return view.render pages jokes create, and let's create this template. Again, we will extend from our layout, and post action will be on route jokes controller dot store, and here let's have a div with a label for name. Here we'll say name. Let's have an input type text name. Let's copy this, and this will be for content. Here we'll say content. Let's make a text area, and name will be content. We need to give the IDs as well, so that when we like click on the label, it focuses the input. So this should be name. And finally, let's have a button type of submit, and here we say add joke. Now, in order to come to this page, we need to create a link in our sidebar. So let me do that here. I will say an anchor tag to route jokes controller dot create, and here we say add your joke. And let me also like wrap all this within a UL. So yeah, this is how it is. And when we click on it, we see our form over here. Now, of course, like this is a very bare bones application that we are building using Adonis. And we don't have like all those niceties of just, like updating the partial DOM. And that is what like I exactly want to show, that when you're like working on your application, you can just build the most basic version of it right away and care about all those things later versus thinking about them from the get-go. And now a lot of people think like these are inferior applications because the page refreshes are happening, but that's not the case. This is how web is, and if you're going to do a bad job with an SPA, it's better to like stick to the basics and the browser do its job. So now let's finally actually create the method to store our joke as well. So here I will say request await request dot validate. Let's quickly validate the user input using the validator. Let's pull in schema. I will say schema dot create. We expect the name and we expect the content. All right. And once the validation is done, we'll like just pull in the name and the content from the validated object. And finally, we'll say joke.create name content. And once that's done, we will redirect the user back to the joke that we have created. So let's get a reference of it here. And we'll go to jokes controller.show ID, or we can just pass in an array joke.id. Lit to the party. All right, was reading the chat. All right, so here we have like a very basic store method where we just get the user input, we persist it into the database, then we'll redirect the user back to the joke that we have just created. So let's test it out. Or I say, hello, this is not a React app. And of course, we get redirected. The sidebar refreshes because it's like a complete new visit to this page. And we see our new joke out here on the top. Now, if we don't put anything inside it, the validation fails. We don't see any validation messages because we are not capturing them. So let's come here and we'll say if flash messages dot has errors dot name, and then create a p tag and show the error, right? And let's copy this, paste it here, just replace the name with content. Now, if we submit the empty form, for sure the validation fails. And if we need better error messages, we can define them here. So I can say when the required validation fails on the name, say, hey, we need the joke name. And if the required validation fails on the content, we will say a joke without content is not a joke. All right, so if we submit again, we do see our customized messages over here. So yeah, we have like a working, very bare bone applications right now. It's really simple. Like we have just one controller. All the controller methods are really small, like two-liners. This is the only one which is big. And here we have a few templates that are basically showing this HTML. And of course, it's not styled, but it's functional. Now, if I want, I can go ahead and like put this application into production, like as a toy app, and people can still use it. It's not the app is not usable, and even if like someone is going to have a bad internet connection, browser will handle that for them. And if they like don't have an internet connection, browser will show that you don't have an internet connection versus us handling all that stuff. That basically happens with a lot of front end applications. So if I go to like Remix and on their homepage, let's get rid of this. Uh, Here they have, yeah, no more spinners, because that happens like uh, a lot of time that you like build an SPA, you put your like that initial HTML page onto a CDN, and after that, if your like server is not responding, then people only see spinners and nothing else. So you have to then like do a lot of work to find out the exact reason behind that, whether the server responded with an error or whether the user have a bad or they don't have an internet connection after loading this initial page. But if you build a standard web app, then browser handles all that for you. And this is what like Remix is trying to say. Even it's a React framework, they get out of that mindset of different rendering modes and they move everything to the server. All right, let's go back to our application. Now what we want to do is we want to get Unpoly running on our application. So there are a couple of ways to use it. Let's use the CDN one and see if we can get it to work. So I will just drop it here. All right. And what we want to do next is give all of these are anchor tags, an HTML attribute called Up Target, and I will just say main. So what's really happening here is every time we click on this link, we are telling Unpoly to make a request. That will be a fetch request. And whatever the response comes back from the server, you only need to update this element which has a class of main. And then we need to give this an attribute of up main. And if we don't give this attribute, then Unpoly will not change the URL. So we actually want to change the URL. So let's do a refresh, go back to our network tab and click this. Now, this time you can see we had made an XHR request versus a complete page refresh. So when a lot of people talk about the front-end apps, they say with the server-rendered apps, you do a whole page refresh, you pull in everything from the server, whether it's the style sheets or the JavaScript files. And just by using like these two HTML attributes, we are not doing that anymore. We're just only fetching what we want. And we are not like destroying the DOM. So to give it a test, let's say we change this color to red. And if we click on hippos, you can see that inline style does not disappear. And that's kind of an indication that it's not destroying the entire DOM. It's only destroying whatever is inside this main element. So, oh, yet another React framework. I believe last month or so, Shopify released Hydrogen as a React framework to build e-commerce apps faster. Yeah, yet another one. All right. So yes, we are not like destroying the entire page. We are only destroying this main section and updating the DOM over there. So right away, just using like two HTML attributes, we are up and running. And everything seems to work fine. Now, the next thing is a lot of people talk about is this scroll restoration. So let's say if I've scrolled to the bottom and I click on it, you can see once again, I think let's move this so that we can see this better. Yeah. So I'm on the bottom right now. I click on it. You can see the right side scrolls, but the left side stays where it was already. So like no scroll positions are getting messed up. It's all working fine. So let's do a reset, move this to the right. Now, the next thing we need to do is every time we click on these links, yes, Unpoly is only updating this side of the DOM, but our server is still fetching everything. So let's say if I open this request and I look at the response, you can see that we are still generating this sidebar. Now, if it was a static sidebar, like something that's not coming from the database, then I will leave it as it is. There is no point in adding conditionals inside our templates when the thing is static. Like keeps your application really simple. Don't over engineer them, trying to squeeze every millisecond of performance, because usually the bottleneck is the network and not your server. So in that case, like I will not even bother doing anything. But in this case, even if I'm like looking at one joke, I'm making a database request to fetch all the jokes. I don't want to do that, right? So there is a very simple way to do that. What I'm going to do is very first, I will give this another attribute of layout main and change this to layout main like this. Now, the reason I'm doing that, I don't want my unpoly navigations to be wired up with classes or IDs, because a class and ID has other meanings as well. Maybe like I'm using this class to do some styling. So I don't want that in my CSS. I change the styles. I come over here. I change my class, but now I have to go ahead and change every link. So that's the reason. Like I want to decouple my classes or IDs. I just want to use like very customized attributes for Unpoly. And these attributes can be anything. I just use like layout and then like whatever section of that layout is. Next thing, what I'm going to do is here I will call my sidebar a layout sidebar. And over here, I will move all this inside a conditional. But before we do that, let's see the Unpoly server API. So if we go to the API, yeah, and we go to the server protocol, and so they're like basically using these headers that they send to the server, and they can also accept them in response from the server. In that way, you are not only relying on the HTML attributes, these headers can also like tell you what your client-side code is trying to do. So let's actually view this over here. So if I click on hippos, I go over here, go to headers. Here you can see that Unpoly is basically sending all these headers to our server. And we can use these headers to find out what our client-side code is trying to do. And here it says that I'm only trying to update the layout main. So the server can decide what it needs to return. So the server can say, okay, like you're only rendering layout main. That means I know like there is no need to generate the sidebar. But this like headers API can get really, I would say, noisy within your templates and within your application code. That's the reason I have created a small abstraction on top of it, and I have put it over here inside a gist. That is what I'm going to use right now. So what I'm going to do is, let's open it in a new tab. I will copy this, and here I will say providers up index.ts. So this is like a very simple class that is just using the Unpoly headers and creating methods around it so that I'm not like relying on these headers directly. There is an abstraction on top of it. And I think we don't need this method because we are not using it. Now, what this class does is not really important. You can actually go ahead and look at the code. It's really simple. When you say like set method, it goes ahead and update the response header. And when you say like uh, get something, then it reads it from the request headers. Next, I'm going to create this provider. So I will say providers up provider.ts like this, and close, open. Now, what this provider is doing is pulling in the HTTP context that you get over here. And where's that file? Here it is. And then it defines a singleton getter on it. So that means you can go ahead and you can say context.up, which will give you an access of this class instance. And this true flag means it's a singleton. So every time you access this property, no new instance will be created. The old one will be reused. And then we are like hooking into the HTTP server, and we are saying like share an instance of this context with the template. And every time you are about to send the response to the browser, you can call this commit method that basically sends some response headers. Now, if you're really interested in Unpoly, then you can go ahead and like figure out like basically read about their server protocol, and then you can look at this code. It's really simple. I've created this abstraction to make things a little easier for myself. And finally, we need to copy this, create another file called providers up context.ts. Now, this basically tells the TypeScript that now we have a new property called up on our HTTP context. Otherwise, it will keep on complaining as it was doing earlier. Finally, I am going to register my provider out here in the end. And it was providers/up/provider. All right. Yep, everything is fine. That means if we come here and we try to access the up property, we basically have like access to all the methods, right? So now like we have this nice abstraction versus dealing with the headers, and we also have like complete IntelliSense for that. So what I'm going to do is here I will wrap this entire UL. I will say if up dot get target. Let me look at the API one more time. Is it get target? And there was, I think, has something as well. Yeah, if target includes. So if target includes, because like Unpoly allows you to update multiple sections of a page, not only one. In that case, this header will have like multiple attributes separated by a comma. So that's the reason we are not doing like an exact check, but we are using this target includes method to check if the client wants to update the sidebar as well. So we just do this, move this here. Now, I think, yeah, that's pretty much all we need to do. Let's clean our network tab, do a refresh, clean it again. Now, if you look at our server response, we don't have any sidebar. We are just like returning this main content and not everything. And client earlier was anyways like ignoring that area. But now the server is also aware about it, and it's not even like rendering the sidebar. Again, you don't have to do it if your sidebar or your header is static. It's an overkill because static doesn't need any like computation. But in this case, we were like pulling in the jokes from the database, and there was no point in paying the penalty of an SQL query when we are like just trying to view a single joke. So this is how it works. Now, let's do one more thing. Now, if we try to submit this form, you will see that we are making a complete like a standard HTTP request to the server. That means we need to update our form as well. So we come here, and let's go back to Unpoly, and I think it was up submit. Yeah. So this is the HTML attribute you have to use in order to make your form submissions use Ajax and not standard form navigations. So I'm just going to drop it here. And I think they have a few more attributes. So they have one called up fail target, something like that. Not this one. So let's go to up form again. And here they have like another HTML attribute to basically use a different target when your form has errors, and use a different target when your form has success, but I'm not able to find it. But anyways, let's first go back, do a refresh. And now if we like try to submit our form, we are not like doing a standard navigation. Again, we have the XHR calls. First, we make a call to this post endpoint. We get a response, which is not visible here because it's a redirect. And then we basically like re-render our form, and here we are showing our form with the errors. And if you look at the response again, we are like not rendering the sidebar again. It's only this form over here. And now let's say we add another joke, way better this time, and still not React. But we have an interesting situation right now. We of course like submit our form, we get redirected, and out here we see our another joke, but the server does not sense the sidebar. That's the reason it's not showing the new joke over here. So fixing it is quite simple. What we can do is we can say up target, layout main, and layout sidebar. I think it has to be comma separated like this. So let's try to add one more. We say hello. One more try. Yep, so this time we get our joke, but we also get our sidebar. That means it gets updated, and we have the sidebar. And if you look at the request headers, you can see it shows on the layout main, layout sidebar, as we have typed it over here. To use a different attribute for a failure, prefix with up fail. Okay, so we need to prefix that one with up fail. But let me actually show you the problem we have right now. So I come back to the form, which is in fact doing a complete refresh because we don't have this. So let me add that, bring it to its own line, this, cool. So get rid of everything. We say add a new joke, only a request to this page. But now when I submit this page empty, we go back to this page. This time we have the sidebar. And the reason behind that is we have updated our target to include the layout main and layout sidebar both. So that means the server is going to return both. But what we need is we need to tell the server that when there is an error, then don't give everything. Then only, let us specify a different target for the error. And when there is a success, then let us specify a different target for that. And Unpoly basically has a directive for that. So it's up fail. Let me copy that and go to our form. And here I will say when we are like failing, when there is a validation error, only update the main section. But when we have success, because we know that we need to refresh the sidebar, we tell it explicitly to refresh the sidebar. So I have done this, but it's still not going to work. And I'll tell you why. So we go here and we still see everything. And the reason behind that is when you are using this up fail target, it's up fail target actually, then Unpoly expects a non 200 error code. And in case of validation, I think it can be 429 or 4401, whatever. Sorry, 400. But AdonisJS does not do that with validation errors. Instead, AdonisJS does a 302 redirect and re-renders the form and basically pass the validation messages as flash messages. So for this, I have to write a very simple one-liner to the exception handler. So I'm back to the gist in case if you are wondering. Let me copy this one line, go to our exception handler. Sorry, let's define the entire handle method and pull in this over here. So what I'm doing is I'm basically overriding the handle method on this base exception handler class, and I say when there is a validation error, you just need to update the response target and use the fail target we got in the request, and then I'll let the default exception handler handle the exception. So again, do a refresh. This time we get an error, and wow, we again have our sidebar. So let's see why. So we have up fail target, and yep, get fail target, and here I'm saying set target to that, which is just main. And if I come to this request, yep, this is how it was here as well. All right, let's look at our implementation. I'm quite sure I have messed up something with that. So this is our commit method. We go through all the flash messages and we pull it, the header from that. Otherwise we pull it from here, and the exception handler does that. So let me drop console log here and paste it here. I think, and submit the form one more time. Yep, it says the fail target is layout main, and in our network we are still rendering everything. Yep, I think it has to do with the order of providers. So this one has to be before the session provider. All right, let's give it another run. I hope, yep, it's fine now. So basically, this implementation that I've created over here, it uses Flash messages to uh, basically keep the request headers and use them in the next request in case of redirect. And since I'm using the Flash messages, this particular code that is interacting with the session, its provider needs to be before the session provider. So that was the reason. So if we go back to our application, here we can see that in case of an error, we are not like rendering the sidebar. But if I create another one, another joke this time, yay, and say add joke, we do refresh the sidebar and also the main area. And in case of validation error, we are not doing that. Whereas if I look at Remix right now, I expected it to behave the same way, but it's actually not doing that. So let's submit an empty form here. It gives me the validation errors. And if I look at the Ajax requests it has made, so first one is for the validations that fails, it got the errors. The other one is to pull in all the joke list items, which is basically to render the sidebar. And I'm not sure why. Like if I do all other navigations, so it only like pulls in that particular joke. But if I go to the form and then submit the form, regardless whether it's like mutating the database or not, even if there is a validation error, they like pull in all the joke list items. I try to figure out why, but I've not been able to do it. Uh, Within like their documentation, they had something like on form submission, they bust the cache, which I don't understand like which cache that is. And I didn't try to like dig too much into it. If someone like uses Remix or if they are sure like how React apps does it, maybe they can tell me why they are like pulling in all the jokes. Whereas on this application, we have been able to do it quite easily. So yes, we don't have like a styled application. It's just a matter of like copy pasting the CSS. But in terms of the user experience, which I usually hear people talking about, that you can have scroll restoration, you don't have to like bust all the pages, you can just do partial updates. Doing all that is like quite easy with Unpoly. And I'm yet to find a place where I have not been able to do it using Unpoly in any of my other apps as well. It's like really well thought out and it works great. So yes, that was a very simple demo. Are you going to publish this abstraction as a package? I will try to once I know that it like handle all the use cases. This is a very quick one I created a couple of hours before doing this stream because dealing with the actual headers is kind of a pain. We are missing the authentication. Yeah, I didn't get into it because it's like a no-brainer to do it with any backend server, like not only Adonis, like if you use Django, Rails, Laravel, um, handling authentication is literally no-brainer. Usually those frameworks are like, including Adonis, is pushed back on this so-called user experience, which is like literally about doing partial updates, maintaining the scroll position, and that's all. Like I haven't seen anything else that any front-end framework does better. There is one thing where they are better right now, and that is like a huge collection of components that they have. Like within the React community, there is like this fantastic uh, library called Redux, and they have like created some really great components that you can use to implement like the modal boxes. You can style them the way you want, and they are accessible as well. So they like take care of everything, whether it's about screen reader, keyboard navigation. We don't have something like that within like vanilla JavaScript. The Alpine creator is working on something called Alpine patterns, which will kind of like it's Alpine components, and this will basically allow anyone using any backend framework to just drop Alpine and have like, I think so, these kind of components available to them, and they don't have to like just move to a full blown front end framework for this. Yep. So I think this was like the only demo I wanted to show. I think I've already said a lot about the front end framework. It's not that, you know, like I don't like them or they are bad or anything like that. I don't want to rant too much about it. It was like just my attempt to show the other side of things, that it's not that bad to build an application that can do partial updates, that can manage scroll and all that stuff with any backend framework. And like Unpoly is really great to do that. You can do it with Hotwire as well, which is from the Basecamp, but that is way too simple. It doesn't give you like too many controls, but Unpoly like kind of handle more situations. So yes, this is what I like really wanted to talk about. Unless someone wants to talk about something, I think I will go ahead, push this code to GitHub so that people can have a look at it, and we'll later publish this stream on YouTube. Cool. I think the comment section looks fairly empty, so I will just go ahead and end the stream now. And I hope you all like learned something from it, apart from the rant I had for the front end frameworks. But all right, guys, I will go ahead and sleep now.